going to be used for students. So if any of you feel more comfortable keeping your cameras off during the recording, you absolutely can. You can also turn them on. This will just be used internally through Cal State Long Beach for anybody who's not able to attend today. We want to thank everybody for being here for the Hiring Trends Workshop. I can speak on behalf of myself for doing research for this workshop. It was very interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot about the current landscape of hiring and what the market is like, the job market is like right now. So with that, we're going to get into some housekeeping. So if anybody is here for a class assignment, please take notes of the presentation. You're required to take handwritten notes during the presentation, and then you'll send a picture of your notes with today's date. You're going to email cdc.events@csulb.edu, subject line class assignment, and then you're going to include your name, class, and the instructor in the email in order to get credit for the class assignment. So I'll give everybody just a minute to do a screenshot if they need to of that. And then we'll get into it. We're happy to go over this again at the end if anyone needs that as well. All right. So we just so happen to have a beautiful picture of the three of us. All three of us today work with the employer engagement team at the Career Development Center. My name is Natalie Smirkanich. I am the employer recruitment and programs coordinator. I have been here for 3 years. I manage the information sessions as well as job postings. So at the end of the session today, we'll be going over CareerLink. I'm very familiar with CareerLink and hopefully can answer any questions for you about that as well. And I will be leaving just a little early today. We have an information session going on from 1 to 2 p.m. with Mercer Consulting at our Career Development Center, but we host both virtual and in-person information sessions. We also have with us today Heather Raposa. Heather, you'll be hearing from later on. She's the internship and job development specialist. She's been here for a year. She plans the industry speaker series. So if any of you have not heard of these yet, they're fantastic events we put on virtually right now through our Career Development Center, where there's a focus on one specific industry, whether it's cybersecurity or health and wellness. And we have panels. So we have a panel of employers who come to speak on that specific industry. They're fabulous. I always really enjoy them and learn a lot during those industry speaker series. She also manages our on-campus interview program as well. So if any of you have come to the center or had virtual interviews through our on-campus interview program, those were all organized by Heather. And then last but not least, we have Amanda Asquith-Kaya. She is the Assistant Director of Employer Engagement. She has also been here for a year, and she oversees our Employer Engagement team. We have 2 other members of the Employer Engagement team, Dee, who is our job fair coordinator, so we help plan all of the job fairs throughout the semester, as well as Marianne Wynn, who is with Grad Business. So she's newer member to the team, really excited to have her on as well. So today you'll be hearing from Heather, Amanda, and myself. So what do you hope to learn from this session? I think it's always helpful as an educator for us to hear from you. What are you interested in learning? What drew you to the session? If you can throw that in the chat now, we'd love to see some of your answers. You're more than welcome to unmute yourself as well. I have had the pleasure in the last 3 years of working here to go through this hiring market, this job market through the pandemic. And so I hope some of you, are interested in how the job market is changing. It is very different than it was 3 years ago. 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and even 6 months. It's drastically changing. Current trends. As you're graduating soon. Well, congratulations on graduating soon, Samantha. And we're going to hopefully give you some great tips for not only as you're graduating, but also as you become a new employee. How to find patterns and when to time applications. Oh, that would be that's great. Great question, Eric. And that's something definitely to consider. I know I used to be a recruiter, and there is a timing to when you put in applications. One of the things to really pay attention to is when we send out stuff about info sessions, job fairs, and on-campus interviews, because those typically align with the application cycles for companies. Wonderful. All right, so today we're going to talk about top hiring trends. We're going to provide you with a ton of resources for job searching, some that's only available to Cal State Long Beach students. So as a student, I would recommend utilizing all those resources that are exclusive to you, especially CareerLink, which we'll go over, is dedicated to looking for Cal State Long Beach students specifically. We're going to also leave some room at the end to ask us anything. Please feel free, though, while we're going to put some questions in the chat if anything doesn't make sense or if you want some clarifying information. And then last but not least, we're going to go over some next steps and advice. So talking about current hiring trends, during the presentation, you're going to get some hot tips. We're going to give you all some more information regarding how to combat some of the hiring trends we're seeing right now, or even just some suggestions to make your life a little bit easier. So we suggest just write down one tip that you'd like to use moving forward, or make note of it. So at the end, we can see which hot tips are most helpful to you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Heather to go over a few hiring trends.
Hello, everyone. So we'll jump right in. And the first trend we're going to be talking about today is how the hiring market is still strong, but it is starting to slow down a little bit. So a little bit of backstory. The annual NACE survey, and NACE, by the way, stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers. They found that while 20% of responding organizations are in fact planning for a recession, which I noticed some of you noted in the chat, only about 6% of employers are expecting to actually cut back on hiring new college graduates, which that's a good sign. And the ones that are cutting back did share 3 factors behind their decision. And those were inflation, overhiring last year, and uncertainty about attrition, which, just in case you don't know, that means the unknown of how many employees will possibly quit and move on to another company within this year. And in addition, so many companies, especially companies within the tech industry, were hiring in such large volumes last year that they overspent their budgets for new talent and are now having to let go of staff to lower their annual expenses. And in case you didn't hear about this in the news, within the first few weeks of the new year, there were multiple major layoffs that were announced by Salesforce, Amazon, Meta or Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and other large tech companies. Now, all this being said, we are still in a time of a good hiring market for those of you who are graduating this spring. But it is just worth noticing that the current hiring projections, although they are still positive, they are off significantly from the predictions from the class of 2022 graduated last year. And that's ultimately because last year, as we started coming out of the worst of the pandemic, all the hiring freezes from 2020 and 2021 caused this pent-up demand for new employees, among other factors, and triggered that really sharp increase in hiring we saw, especially during the first half of 2022. And now the current projected hiring market is just a little more closely aligned with what we saw before the pandemic. So for this trend, our hot tip would be to remind you to research and build your negotiation skills to help you advocate for yourself, because it is still a strong hiring market. Next slide. Alrighty, and our next trend is all about quiet hiring, which is on the horizon for a few different reasons. So first of all, hiring usually falls within 3 categories. We have backfilling old roles, creating new ones to help the company grow, or addressing an immediate need. So with quiet hiring, it's all about that third category of addressing an immediate need. And even if it doesn't technically involve any new hiring at all, which it doesn't. The idea behind quiet hiring is to prioritize the most crucial business functions at any given time, which could mean temporarily mixing up the roles of current employees. And this is what is referred to as internal quiet hiring. So just to help it make a little bit more sense, a recent example would be the Australian airline Qantas. They recently asked their executives, so all their leadership, to address a labor shortage last year, in part by rotating as baggage handlers. So although this helped their executives ultimately gain a deeper understanding of how the company's day-to-day operations work and whatnot, and it was a huge success for the company, it meant that there were no new entry-level employees hired or technically needed at that time. So we want to help you learn how you can combat quiet hiring. And we're recommending that you convey yourself to employers as being a very well-rounded, flexible individual so that you can demonstrate your ability to be an employee who can fill many different job roles if the company ever needed that in the future. And ways that you could do this would be to build your skills repertoire to expand into cross-functional job tasks outside of, let's say, the job role specialization that you're being hired for. So for example, you could become a Microsoft Excel expert, learn how to use creative applications such as PowerPoint, Canva, Adobe InDesign, and LinkedIn Learning or YouTube are great tools to learn these different applications and just research other skills too. And ultimately, these are just a few examples of common skills that are easily learnable that can just really help to make you stand out. But there are many more as well. And depending on your specific field or industry, I'm sure you'll be able to do some research and figure out what general skills would be useful, but to know, but possibly a little outside of the scope of work for a job that you're specifically applying for. And in the end, our hot tip for you for this one is to market yourself to employers as being a team player who has many skills and can be flexible with different job roles and tasks, and also just being someone who's willing to and open to trying new things. And that's it for this slide.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So another hiring trend that came up in our research is that there is a disconnect between generations. And you might see this as you enter the workforce, as you get your first entry level job. So some older generations do not understand the reaction of younger generations. I think a lot of buzzwords are going around right now are quiet quitting, ghosting, or texting over calling. And they're seeing that Gen Zs, millennials have less experience talking on the phone. And sometimes it makes it hard for them to connect with a supervisor who's from a different generation. Another disconnect we see is remote work. So a lot of baby boomer bosses are not completely sold on remote work. They have this idea, if everyone is in the same building, they can make sure that you're watching. They can see if you're disappearing for lunch or when you leave early. And so it might seem kind of like an outdated thought, but that is something to keep in mind when you are starting your job. One of the hot tips that I would definitely recommend is be aware of these generational differences when you start a job and use them to your advantage. One of the things I do whenever I start a job or whenever a new supervisor comes on board, even a colleague that is new, I'll ask them, like, how do you like to be contacted? And then I'll also let them know how I prefer to be contacted, if I like to set up meetings or if I like when they come to my door and knock. But it helps to give that platinum service, which is that you treat people the way that they want to be treated. So if somebody likes to be called, then you give them a call when you're running late, or you give them a call when you are coming in or when you're having problems with a project. But having that generational awareness, I think, will really serve you in the workplace. And then another really hot tip, and this is coming from, my husband works remotely. And so one of the things he does is he keeps track of his productivity when he works from home. One really great way to do that is through your calendar. So if you're working in Outlook or Google, chunking portions of your day and putting what you're working on in each of those sections helps keep you accountable, helps you show your manager what you've been up to. And then when you meet with your supervisor, you're able to let them know that you're a strong worker and you're very strong at working independently and managing your own time. Make it hard for them to not see the value in you working from home. That's what I would say. That's like, you want to have that information, that data for them. So on that same note, one big hiring trend is hybrid working. And this just depends on, like, really varies across industry. But one of the interesting things I found about hybrid working when I was doing my research is that studies showed that interactions with employees' immediate teams and their close networks was strengthened during their remote work, but interactions with secondary networks, so anybody, like any employers that we work with, or even our students that we work with, those interactions shrank. So some things to take away from that. And this gave me some time for reflection. I was like, well, I did feel like during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I did feel closer with my immediate family and with my very close friends, but there were all those other secondary networks that definitely shrank a little bit. So, and how can you reflect on that yourself and kind of see how if this is rang true for you during the last year or so. There are also experts are saying that the hybrid work model, which means there's in-person work as well as remote work, this will allow employees to enjoy the freedom of both the remote work and then also having the benefits, those one-on-one interactions in the office. And the remote work productivity, it is very dependent on the organization's needs, roles, and people, and it should be done differently in every work environment. We definitely work with a lot of employers here at the Career Development Center who need to be in person, and they're in person every day. Other work environments are hybrid, while other ones are completely remote. So it's going to vary based on the job and the industry that you're in. And a lot of companies are offering hybrid work to attract talent. And so they're just requiring that their employees now work in a certain radius so that they can visit the office when they need to. I know some people who that's their option currently at work. So hot tips. Reflect on how remote interactions have impacted your life. As I said at the beginning, I definitely, this hybrid work model makes me reflect on how my interactions have been impacted from being more remote. And are there people you feel closer to or more isolated from in the last few years? And then I found this to be very interesting data. A study conducted by ZipRecruiter found that job seekers would take a 14% pay cut to work remotely. And I just, for you, would you take a pay cut to work remotely? How important is remote work to you? Something to think about and to re-envision as you start looking for a job, of if it is important to be in person, to have a mixture, or if you would like to work remotely. Future of the work is flexible, and we see different industries adjusting to this accordingly. So not just working remotely, but maybe this is less days. I know there's been a lot of articles about a 4-day work week. I think the reality is in some industries, it's just not going to happen. But I do think there are some companies that are very forward thinking and that are looking more to like the quality of work versus how many hours you're working. And it's more important, like when the work gets done or what work gets done versus where work gets done. Yeah, we do. We love a work-life balance. And I think that that's a really great thing about a lot of the younger generations is that we do enjoy a work-life balance, and flexible work schedules, remote, hybrid gives us that flexibility. And work-life boundaries are respected. So workers are trusted to get their work done. And I think that is something that I've always appreciated at a job. So for any of you who are looking for jobs now or graduating seniors, reflect on when and where you've worked best. I can speak from my experience. I never went to the library, not once. I am so social that when I was in college, I could not go to the library. I would get nothing done. So for me, I work really well isolated because I'm so social. But I do like having social interactions. So a hybrid workspace would be perfect for me. I get some in person and then also that alone time to get some work done. Think about how you thrive. Like, do you thrive with deadlines? Do you like in-person accountability, flexible schedules, virtual contact versus a Zoom call? And this will help you ask the right questions about work environments when you're interviewing for a job. I think this is, questions I've been asked in interviews, and I've also asked in interviews is, where do you work best? Explain a work environment that you work best. And you'd be surprised by how many people who have no idea. Or they say, yeah, I've never thought about that. So give it some thought. Think about how you do, how and when you do best, do your best work. In college, before college, when you work, if you work now, part-time, full-time, give it some thought. Quiet quitting. So this is a buzz term right now. We hear of people quietly quitting. So what we're seeing right now as a trend is that those who are quietly quitting will ultimately lead to being quietly fired. And companies who are looking to trim the fat, to look at where their budgets are being allocated, they're not going to tolerate workers who are just doing the bare minimum. And so we're going to see more supervisors who are calling out people who are disengaged with their jobs. There's this trend, and we're seeing this now, with this work-life balance mention, is that there is a shift to a worker-boss relationship that is transactional. And, you do your work and you're paid for that work. But in response, ultimately, workers will switch jobs to find better opportunities. They'll be more careful with what opportunities they take. And instead of taking something that's a bit more of a risk, they'll find a secure employer. Whenever we hear the word recession, I think the response is to find something that is very stable. So for any of you who keep this in mind, if someday you find yourself quiet quitting, I think, quietly quitting is where you're doing the bare minimum at your job, because you have felt internally like you're not being validated or you're not valued at your job. And so make sure you exhaust your resources if you are quietly quitting. Have tough conversations with your supervisors about how you're not feeling engaged or you're not being compensated appropriately for your work, and bring data with you to those meetings. Make sure you're saying, these are all the projects I'm working on outside of the scope of my job, and I'd like to talk about, compensation or other opportunities for me. Expand your network. Start talking to people outside of your network and see if they are also feeling something similar, or if they feel very engaged by their job. Start putting feelers out there. But if you are at a job and you've quietly quit, please take the time to update your resume and figure out what priorities you have and are very much value for when you look for your next job. I wouldn't encourage anybody who is quietly quitting to stay. I think it's your body, your mind's way of saying that it's time to find another opportunity. So if you find yourself quietly quitting, which is very common right now, take time to see how you could step outside that. On those same heels of quiet quitting, most of the reason people are quietly quitting is because there is a high amount of employee burnout right now. There's very high productivity expectations, and it's been like this since the pandemic. And so it's caused a prolonged state of stress and anxiety. And we see how it's affecting the workforce. So really important that you're taking care of yourself, at a job. And if you are finding out that you're burnt out, find ways to take care of yourself outside of work as well as in work. Some companies are offering mental health benefits, including short-term disability for people who are experiencing burnout. But this is all just a culmination of the Great Resignation, where we saw a lot of people quitting their jobs and leaving them and not even knowing where they'd go to next. And then also quiet promotion, that quiet hiring movement, where a lot of people are being hired from within and being given more responsibilities, and it's compounding to feel like burnout. And I can speak as a young worker. Inflation is so high, and people are struggling to pay their medical, their other bills, their food. Food is so expensive right now that there's a lot of burnout going on right now. So one of the hot tips that I would give is that when you're interviewing for a job, when you're looking at jobs, ask about employees' mental health or any of their healthcare benefits, and ask how they address burnout at their company, or how they address like if they're adding work to your workload and they're having higher expectations of you, is there pay compensation? Will they be taking other things off your plate? So you need to be an advocate for yourself. All right, pass it on to Amanda.
Thanks, Natalie. So I'm going to share the next couple of tips, and then we're going to go ahead and pivot into talking about the state of the job market right now. AI is up and coming. It's already here in many ways. It's going to continue to grow and impact the work that everybody is doing. You all may be familiar with ChatGPT as a idea of AI and how it's even impacting the educational sphere that we're all in at the moment. So a few impacts that AI is making includes first and foremost in the hiring process. So human resources professionals are increasingly and will continue to automate hiring processes in order to free up their time. So again, with the Great Resignation, a lot of HR professionals quit their positions or transitioned. So there's now a little bit of a shortage there, and the current professionals who are still there are feeling a little overwhelmed. So having their time freed up is really appealing. We've already seen this happen too with ATS, which is automated tracking system. This is what a lot of companies use. When you apply, they scan your resume through it and look for keywords and phrases from the job description. If your resume and cover letter have those keywords and phrases, they'll continue looking at your application. If they don't, though, then they're discarded. So it's good to be mindful of that. Also, a lot of companies are moving towards having their first interviews be a recorded interview. So they ask applicants to answer some questions while recording themselves rather than engaging live or virtually with a person. And then lastly, too, we've also seen a lot of companies transition to skills-based tests. These can be anything from personality assessments to, depending on the industry, it might be technical skills. So a lot of times, those scores are looked at too as part of the interview process. So it's good things to keep in mind, and our career counselors are aware of these trends as well, and also help with providing tips on how to work through them. We've also seen too the rise of the metaverse. So a artificial reality, essentially, where lots of different events and meetings and whatnot can happen. We're seeing it with employers doing this for a lot of their onboardings. When they hire somebody and they're getting them onboarded onto a job, they're having them go through virtual reality onboarding rather than maybe an in-person onboarding or maybe a Zoom meeting to make it more interesting for employees. And we're going to continue to see different ways that this is used with work engagement in terms of finding jobs and also in terms of building out new businesses, which is pretty cool. The future of work, right? Also, humans and machines are going to create a blended workforce. Y'all may have heard a little bit about the rise of machines taking over jobs. This was kind of a big news article, especially a few years back, about the robots are taking our jobs away. It's just going to change. So some jobs that can become more automated, like let's say if a job heavily relies on numbers, that's something that may be easier for a machine to do. Other jobs may rely more on people skills. So as I mentioned too, those human skills are critical that I list below. But machines and humans are going to continue to work more closely together. So knowing technology is really helpful. I think there's going to have to be certain checks and balances considered, though, in terms of what it's okay for a computer or a machine to do versus a human, and safeguards put in place. But that's going to continue to increase and to continue to happen. So your new coworker may be a robot, who knows? And definitely, though, those human skills, as I mentioned, are really important. These are things like communication, leadership, collaboration, cultural and social intelligence, teamwork, emotional intelligence, you name it. So those things are all really great to have going into any position, and all things that a lot of students graduating from Cal State Long Beach have from their classes, part-time or full-time jobs, student organizations you may be a part of, you name it. So it's good to still see those human skills. So a hot tip, so I would recommend researching what the future of your field might look like with advanced AI. It may be good to know what is currently being done in your field, so you can kind of Google an industry you're interested in and AI and see what's the latest and greatest, what's happening. As I mentioned before, ChatGPT is a big thing in the education sector, so that's something myself and all of my coworkers are pretty aware of, and a lot of other folks on campus. So depending on what area you might be interested in, entertainment, hospitality, finance, you name it, it can be helpful to kind of just keep an eye on what's going on there and maybe what skills you want to shine for you, and also maybe what technical skills you might want to work on to be really successful in your industry. ChatGPT, thank you for asking. ChatGPT is a bot that essentially you can ask it a question and it will come up with an answer. Yes, so some people use it to, let's say you want to write a thank you note to your grandmother for a gift that you got for your birthday. So you can ask ChatGPT, can you please write a note to my grandmother to thank her for the earbuds I got for my birthday, and it will come up with a response that you can then send out to your grandmother. So it's pretty interesting platform. Ethically a little fuzzy, but pretty interesting. All right, great. So another trend that we're seeing is between the government and the labor market. So the government, federal government and the state governments and county governments have different policies and laws in place around work. You may have heard of things like equal opportunity employers or whatnot. So those are things that are kind of set up as checks and balances to keep employers in compliance. So this is going to expand moving forward. So environmental, social, and governance reporting will expand beyond just the usual in order to attract talent. So this means companies are going to be even more mindful of their environmental and their social footprints. A lot of companies have already started to make changes in terms of how they might be doing things environmentally, or how they might be contributing to social movements or supporting social movements. And this is in order to attract folks to apply and be interested in working for their organization. We found that a lot of folks in Generation Z, which is the current generation of traditional age college students, are really interested in working for companies that care about the environment, that care about social justice issues. So companies are paying attention to that and being really aware of it. One example of this is there has been a push for more transparency in pay for jobs. So starting on January 1st in California, it has been decreed that all companies over a certain size have to include a salary or a hiring wage on their job description. That way you as a job seeker can look at that job description and know what you can expect to be making if you apply for that job. This has been the case in few other states as well. And California just got on board. It's really exciting because it helps to level out the playing field in terms of applying for jobs. There is a lot of pay disparity among different racial and ethnic groups between women and men. So the hope with this is to help make that disappear and help pay be more transparent. There's also been growing interest in unionization and strikes due to what one article called the employee empowerment movement. So you may have heard of Starbucks trying to unionize different Starbucks work. You may be involved in that. You may work for Starbucks and be trying to unionize at your store. Also, too, you may have heard at the UC campuses about the graduate students going on strike to get more fair benefits and wages. So this is something that is taking on more and more interest for a lot of workers and organizations, and can be something that could be mindful depending on what industry or what job or company that you might be working for, if it is unionized, if it's moving towards unionization, if there is any movement of disgruntled employees who want to strike for any reason, can be helpful to kind of keep that in mind and be in the know on that. And last but not least, there is a continued focus on diversity, equity, inclusion in the hiring process with new hires to really help develop the next generation of talent, to diversify the labor force, diversify a company's workforce, and really only strengthen a company or an organization for their future. So that is continuing to happen as well. Next slide, please. Oh wait, I think hot tip first. That's right, okay, hot tip. So I suggest setting a news alert for companies of interest to learn more about what they're doing in these areas. So if you are familiar with LinkedIn and you are on LinkedIn, you can follow different companies on LinkedIn and you can check and see what they're posting on their LinkedIn page. You can go on Google and set a news alert for companies to see what's the latest items or changes that's coming out of their boardrooms and their meetings and whatnot. So it's nice to kind of follow a company and be up to date on what's going on with it. It's also really helpful when it comes to being interviewed by a certain company to kind of showcase your knowledge that you've been paying attention to what's been going on in the company. So good for many reasons to keep that in mind. All right, so we heard a little bit about this earlier, the focus on employee well-being. So especially given the last few years with the pandemic, the Great Resignation, social justice movements, just so many things going on, the war in Ukraine, people are burnt out, as Natalie was chatting about, and emotional and mental health is becoming more and more of a consideration for companies in terms of employee well-being. So they are leading into an investment on benefits, resources, and programs that help combat things like stress, burnout, and anxiety. These can be anything from a paid mental health day off to counseling services, both virtually and in person, and other thoughts as well. So companies are paying attention to that and trying to make changes here, especially in order to retain their employees. A remarkable 81% of workers will be looking for workplaces that support mental health in the future, and you all might be one of them. And I think it's great for companies to consider, even if we all hadn't gone through a very difficult couple of years, because this is really important, especially for employee happiness and retention at the company. And in a pretty cool turn of events, companies have also even started creating positions that have chief health and well-being officers, which is really neat. So a few years back, we were seeing them create chief diversity officers, and that's still happening, which is wonderful. And now there's this movement towards chief health and well-being officers, which is really great. And similar to what Natalie shared earlier, research the benefits of any employers that you might be applying for jobs with, or if you get a job offer, ask about the benefits, including well-being programs, to see what's out there for you and what's available to you as an employee of that organization. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second and just see, I know you just got a lot of information. I want to see if there's any questions on any of our current trends. All right, well, I know there'll be time for questions at the end. So just to give you an idea of where our current employment landscape is at, we have a few slides to help you wrap your heads around what you can look forward to. So first and foremost, Heather mentioned this earlier, the job market in California, the labor market is still strong. Unemployment is still very low. The labor force remains fairly steady. So things are still going well in terms of the labor force, which is good. That's really nice to see that even with inflation and the price of eggs at the grocery store, that the labor market is still hanging in there. Next slide, please. To give you an idea too of, in terms of our region of the country, what the fastest growing occupations are. I included some for LA County and also for Orange County. And you can see it's a wide variety of different positions. Everything from positions in healthcare, mathematics, even the arts with photographers, education with speech language pathologists, athletics trainers, software developers, counseling and social work. So there's quite a wide variety of options out there in terms of occupations in different industries that are definitely still hiring, and it's still have lots and lots of job openings right now. Next slide. As Heather mentioned earlier, though, there are layoffs occurring. Primarily, this is in big technology companies, as she mentioned. We've also seen a little bit as well in big finance companies like Goldman Sachs, for instance, which is on this list. So that is occurring. And I'll provide some options for how to combat that. It's good to keep in mind if any of these are companies that you're interested in. Depending, some might be still hiring for certain positions, others may have a hiring freeze, but there are other options out there, which I'll chat about in just a minute. To help keep track of how a certain occupation might be doing in terms of if it's growing or changing or slowing down, these are two great websites that can help you research different jobs and what you need to know about those certain positions in terms of what the pay might look like, if it's a growth industry or not, what skills you may need to be successful in this job. They're both put out by the US government. And while they're not necessarily the prettiest websites out there, they have a lot of great information. So I do recommend checking those out, inputting different jobs or careers you might be interested in to get more information and keep up to date on what's going on with that specific job. So some things to consider: unemployment is still very low. A recession is potentially looming. There's still a lot of question marks around this. A lot of companies do feel that recession's coming up. I've heard a number of economists, though, say that it's not coming up because not all of the markers are there for a recession. I know the Federal Reserve is trying to slowly inch up interest rates in order to not have a big recession happen. So still a little up in the air, but the job market is still really good right now and the unemployment rate is low. As I mentioned earlier, best way to kind of keep track of going on is to follow news on companies of interest, to stay up to date on any announcements that they may have regarding their hiring. So that's very important. If you are interested in working for a sector that's having lots of layoffs, I do want to mention to consider companies in other industries, as well as companies in the industry that you'd like to work for. If you're a computer programmer, they're needed in all different types of industries and companies beyond just in technology. For instance, we had Nordstrom's come to our fall career fair, and they're hiring for computer programmers to work on their website for selling their clothes. So there's still lots of opportunities available in that sense. Same thing for finance workers. If you're interested in finance, every company and organization has a finance department. We have a finance person who works in our office. There's tons of finance people who work here at Cal State Long Beach. So there are lots of jobs out there, may not initially be in the finance industry or the technology industry, but even those jobs can be great experience for them pivoting into different industries. And I will say too, I do still know a number of tech companies, for instance, that are not the big ones that are still hiring workers. So even if it's a medium size or a startup type organization, they are still hiring at this point in time. And lastly, too, questions for you all to consider. Now that we've kind of talked about the job market, how does this help you compare to what you perceive job in the internship market to look like? So some of this information may solidify what you already knew and thought. Others of this information might be new to you, so it's good to reflect on that and see what you've learned today or what has solidified in your mind in terms of what the job market looks like moving forward. And I'm going to pass it to Natalie.
All right, so I'm going to go over a few different resources for job and internships. So there's a lot of different professional resources. So I will show you CareerLink if you haven't been in there already, as well as Career Shift, which is accessible through CareerLink. Going Global is great for international opportunities. If any of you are looking to work outside of the US. Candid Career. This allows students to learn firsthand about different occupations with pre-recorded informational interview videos. So great resource. There's going to be a QR code to go to all these resources with links. Beach Nexus, we are big fans of Beach Nexus here at the CDC. This is an exclusive mentoring and professional network for Cal State Long Beach students that allows the students to participate in short-term networking as well as a formal mentoring program. Big Interview, also big fans of that program at the CDC. It's an interview prep tool. It has video tutorials, virtual mock interviews, tailored by industry and experience level. You can also videotape yourself on Big Interview just to see how you're coming off. And we use it here at our center with our student assistants. So it's a great platform. Forage is also wonderful. It offers students virtual experience projects from well-known companies. I know there's one from Lululemon. They also have some other big companies that have these virtual experience projects. So CareerLink, when you go into CareerLink, you can get there through your SSO. You'll be able to search for positions daily. We are posting new jobs and internships. This is an outdated number, 200 to 300 a week. This last week was 425. And some weeks we've been getting up to 650, 700 jobs that are being posted. We also have them based on what college you are in. So if you are in a specific college, you should be receiving monthly emails that say featured jobs, and there will be jobs specifically tailored to your career and your college that you're a part of. Career Shift. So this is a fabulous job search engine. You can use it to find jobs, companies, even contacts. I feel like this is one of the most underutilized resources we provide students with. You can also search for remote positions. I'm going to show you how to get to Career Shift in just a minute. So this is the resource guide. So I'll leave this up on the screen while I just say that this is the one-page guide. It'll give you all the resources we've shared. You can also access it through this bit.ly link. We also found today something called the Flex Index. And the Flex Index, I will show you, is a website that is specifically geared toward hybrid and remote work. So while y'all are looking at the resource guide, I am going to jump over to CareerLink. Just one second. Let's see.
And I also just put the link, everyone, to the resource guide in the chat in case you want to click on it there and take a look.
All right, so this is what CareerLink looks like when you first sign in. It has a new updated landing page. If you want to get into the Beach Nexus mentor program, you can click right here on the bottom. You can schedule an appointment, and you can also get to Career Shift as well. And then also things to note here. So you can get into the events. This is where all the information sessions are going to be, as well as other workshops. Last but not least, I'm going to show you the Flex Index. So you can check for full-time, hybrid, and remote work requirements from tons of different companies. So I'll throw this in the chat as well. And that way you'll be able to check this out. All right. And with that, I will pass it back to Heather.
Alrighty, everyone, I'm going to share my screen with you, so please bear with me. Amanda, what is everyone seeing?
You're good. We are seeing next steps and advice.
Great. Perfect. Alrighty. Okay, great. So here are our next steps and advice. So firstly, I strongly recommend that you do in fact take advantage of the resources that we just shared with you. I added that link in the chat in case everyone didn't see that. So go ahead and take a look at it now or in your own time, whatever works best. And secondly, remember that this is the time that we're still in is still in fact a job candidates hiring market. So please advocate for yourself during the hiring process and really spend time reflecting and learning what you really want out of your future job. And then ask another professional how to advocate for those things and how to look for them properly. Thirdly, it's never too early to start networking. Go ahead and use CareerShift or LinkedIn. Reach out to people that are in positions or industries that you want to work in and see if they'll be willing to talk to you. Ask them for an informational interview. Typically, people are very open and in fact, more than willing to share with you their personal experiences, their professional experiences. And not only will this be educational for you, but you'll also build a lot of professional connections this way too, which is always helpful. And lastly, please remember that you hold the power to determine what steps you take next to advance your career and get prepared for interviews and the workforce. We've shared a lot of resources here with you today, but also feel free to come in for advising whenever. You have all the tools at your fingertips, so please, if you need help figuring out how to actually utilize them, just come in and ask us. We'd be more than willing to help. And then next, we're going to do a little activity. So I'd like everyone to either think about or write down at least one action step that you're going to do that you heard during this presentation. I'll give you a minute or so to do that. And if you all thought about it or still kind of writing it down, if anyone would like to share, I'd encourage you to feel free to unmute yourself, or please drop it in the chat so we can all kind of discuss. Okay, here I see. Love, you guys were so fast. Wow. Okay, so we have set up a LinkedIn finally. Love it. It's never too late to get a LinkedIn. That's perfect starting point. Making a counseling appointment for interview prep. Yes, that's a great idea. We also, Emily, host a lot of resume and cover letter building workshops our career counselors do. So, and those are all listed on CareerLink as well. So if you'd also just like to attend one of those workshops, we can do that too. Updating resume to have keywords. Love that. Updating resume, great. Yes, looking more to CareerLink and LinkedIn. These are great. Thank you guys so much for participating. All really wonderful and helpful next steps for sure. Alrighty, and then just before we finish up, we wanted to share the Career Development Center's open hours, as well as the times for virtual and in-person drop-in advising with our career counselors and our trained student assistants. So we are open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and are located in Brotman Hall, room 250. So we're on the second floor of Brotman Hall, the same floor as the fountain. Our virtual drop-in hours are Monday through Friday between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. and Tuesdays, it's extended until 6:30 p.m. And in-person drop-in hours are Wednesday and Thursday between 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Make sure I got that right. Yes. And please feel free to take a picture of the slide if you would like. I'll give you a minute or so to do that if you'd like. And then last but not least, does anybody have any questions? Amanda and I would be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. You can paste them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself, whichever works better. And Amanda just posted a link to our workshops for resume writing too. Do you have practice interview workshops or appointments? You know, Amanda, we have mock interviews. Okay. And there's also, I believe, a resource that we shared too on the resource guide. You can do virtual mock interviews like with the program. But Amanda, would you mind elaborating a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So there's a few different ways to practice interview tips. So We do offer workshops on interviewing, which is super helpful for a good overview. Our career counselors also do have interviewing appointments where you can schedule a mock interview, which is basically like a practice interview. It can seem a little nerve-wracking, but it's a nice way to like get practice interview with a safe and comfortable person. So that's really nice. And then of course, I know we shared Big Interview as a good virtual resource where it's pre-recorded people asking questions and you can record yourself back answering those questions and it gives you tips. Okay, great. Looks like another question. How do you determine appropriate values in our skills, especially as recently graduated students? That's a great question. So skills really can depend on your background, experience, and the type of job or industry that you want to go into. They're usually split into two categories. So there's hard skills, which a lot of times are like technical skills. So if you know any computer programs or applications, or if you know Microsoft Excel really well, or social media apps, those can all count as hard skills. If you know any coding languages, things along those lines, or any actual languages, those are great skills to include. And then there's also soft skills or transferable skills. Some of those are ones I listed earlier when I talked about communication, teamwork, leadership, the human skills. And those are things that you can demonstrate when you write a resume or a cover letter in the different positions you've done. So if you have been a cashier at a fast food restaurant, that counts as analytical skills because it's working with money. If you have been part of a student organization and had to plan an event, that's teamwork skills, event planning experience. So even with your classes, if you've written a research paper, that gives you skills about research and skills along the lines of, oh, go ahead, Heather.
Oh, I did. I think.
Okay. Along the lines of, comprehension of different materials and bringing things all together, critical thinking. So that's just a little bit of a snapshot of how to talk about skills. I know we're also at time, but we can stay on for a couple minutes if folks still have questions in time. The LinkedIn workshops, I put a link in the chat to our website with all of our workshops are listed on there. So I encourage you to take a look at that to see what's coming up when. And then looks like there's also a question about pay negotiation. Yes, that's a great question because that's a really tricky and nerve-wracking category for a lot of folks. Our career counselors can help guide you through pay negotiation and different strategies and what to consider and what to ask and what your comfort level is regarding that. So we do offer support.
I want to add in one thing there too. Angie, when you're looking at a job posting, let's say, look at everything look at all the requirements of the job. And then if you, let's say, meet all of the requirements, let's say you meet the educational background, the certification requirements, everything, they'll typically have a section that says required, like required experience or requirements. And then they'll have those preferred experiences. So if you're applying for a job, let's say, where you only meet the required requirements, but you only meet one or two of the preferred ones, you won't necessarily be in a bargaining power position for the salary. So somewhere like that, they probably want to start you at what the base salary is or somewhere very close to that. But let's say you're applying for a job where you meet everything, every single thing they have listed in that job description, you have experience doing, and you can articulate it, even the preferred requirements, then you'll be in a much higher bargaining position to ask for the higher range of the salary. And California law was recently passed that requires all jobs to post the salaries and salary ranges. So it'll be much more transparent and you'll know exactly like what the max they could pay you, what the minimum is they can pay you. So you'll really be able to kind of track yourself and see, okay, where do I fall on this spectrum based off of the job application? So just wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think that's great information. You definitely don't need to meet all requirements to apply for a job. Usually if you like numbers, usually like if you meet 60% of requirements, you're encouraged to apply for that position. It means you'll be qualified for it. If it is something that you hit all of the requirements and maybe a little bit more than that, you could also even consider applying to the next level up. So that's a consideration too. Well, thank you all for the wonderful questions. If we don't have any more, then we can go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you everyone for coming and for your such active participation. This was so much more fun than it has been in the past because we actually got to talk with you all and really connect. I'll post my email in the chat again, and Amanda will too, in the event you have any other follow-up questions that we weren't able to get to. We can absolutely follow up with you. But that's it. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the meeting. But thank you so much, everyone, again, for coming and for participating.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. You want to stop recording?